All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do a couple more problems out of section 3.2, building truth tables. Okay, I'm going to try problem number 15 here in section 3.2 of your textbook. And this is how it goes. So we would read this as not Q and P. If not Q, then P, then not P. Okay. So we have two statements, P and Q. So to make my table, I have my P and Q statements. P is true, true, false, false. Q is true, false, true, false. Order of operations, or the hierarchy, says I'm inside parentheses first, and I'm going to have to deal with the negation of Q. Therefore, I'll have not Q column added on. And we just negate the Q column. Negation of true is false. Negation of false is true. Negation of true is false. Negation of false is true. Then I'm going to have to deal with the and, okay, inside the parentheses. So my next column will be this entire statement. So this next column is going to concern my P column and my not Q column. The only time an and is true is if both these statements are true. Both this statement and this statement are true. Well, that only occurs right here. If not Q is true and P is true, the whole statement's true. So this is true. Otherwise, it's false. Notice here, not Q is true, but P is false. This is false, false, false. The only other thing we have to deal with now is, well, we really have the negation of P. We should put the negation of P in. We never did that. We could have done that earlier in here, but I'll do it now. Negation of P. The negation of P is the negation of the P truth value. So the negation of true is false. The negation of true is false. Negation of false is true. The negation of false is true. Finally, we can deal with the conditional. Okay, if this, then this. Keep in mind, the only time a conditional is false is if true, then false implies that the conditional is false. So in general, if the antecedent, the first statement is true, and the second statement, the consequence, is false, then the conditional is false. Other than this condition right here, this situation here, a conditional is always true. So to form if this statement, then this statement, this, we would use this column as the first statement, and this is the second statement. So the only time this conditional will be, and that the conditional will be my last column here. The entire conditional. This should be not P. All right. The only time this conditional is going to be false is if the first statement is true and the second statement is false. That's going to occur right here. The first statement is true. The second statement is false. This is the only situation for which this conditional will be false. All the other ones will have the conditional be true. And we're done. This is your answer. These are the truth values of this statement that we were being asked to evaluate. So that one's done. All right, I'm going to try number 17 next. Again, we only have two statements involved in this compound statement, which is a biconditional. So therefore, I'll have my P and Q column to start off my truth table. P takes on the values of true, true, false, false. Q takes on the values of true, false, true, false. All right, what's the first column we have to add? Well, we're inside the parentheses, and we have to deal with the and of P and Q. That'll be my next column. Now, the only time an and is true is if both statements are true, and that occurs for the first scenario. True, 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 and true gives us true. All the other statements are false. That one's done. Next, I'm going to go inside the parentheses here, and I'll have to deal with the negation of P. Let's form that column next. The negation of P. The negation of P is negating the P column. So the negation of true, false. Negation of true, false. Negation of false, true. Negation of false, true. And then I'll deal with the or inside the parentheses here. So my last column, this column here is going to be Q or not P. That means I'm going to take this column and or it with this column. So an or, remember, is true in all cases. The only time an or is false is if both statements are false. So where does that occur? That only occurs right here. If the first statement, Q, is false, and the second statement, not P, is false. The or is false. Other than that, an or is always true. So true or false is true. True or true is true. False or true is true. The only thing left remaining is the biconditional. But we got to understand what a biconditional really means. The only time a biconditional is true is in two situations. If both statements are true, then a biconditional is true. If both statements are false, then a biconditional is also true. Other than that, a biconditional is always false. So my last column is going to be the entire statement, the biconditional. So the only time that this is going to be true is if this statement is true and this statement is true. So we're going to be using this column as the first statement, and the second statement is going to be this column here. Again, the only time a biconditional is true is if this is true and this is true, or this is false and this is false. Well, here we have true and true. So true if and only if true means this will be true. False if and only if false means this will also be what? True. All the other ones are false. False if and only if true is false. False if and only if true is false. And we're done. This is your answer. So 17 is done. All right, I'm going to do number 18 now. This is read if P, then Q or not P. Again, we have two statements, so we start off our truth table with a P and Q column. P is true, true, false, false. Q is true, false, true, false. The first thing we're going to deal with is inside parentheses. We're going to have to deal with the negation of P. That'll be my next column. The negation of P is the negation of the P column truth values. The negation of true is false. The negation of true is false. The negation of false is true. The negation of false is true. Still inside the parentheses, now we'll deal with the or. So my next column is going to be Q or, not P. That means I'm going to have to use this column, Q, and or it with this column. The only time an or is false is if both these statements are false. That occurs right here. False or false is false. All the other ones are true. True or false is true. True or true is true. False or true is true. Now we deal with the conditional. And keep in mind, when is a conditional false? The only time a conditional is false is if the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. This is the only time that a conditional is false. All other times, it's true. Okay, so my last column is going to be the entire statement that we're being asked to evaluate. All right, and the columns I'm going to use is the P column and this column here. So if the first statement is true and the second statement is false, then the conditional is false. Where does that occur? Well, here the first statement is true and the second statement is true, so the conditional is true. Here the first statement is true and the second statement is false. Oh, that's where the conditional is false. The first statement is false and the second statement is true. The conditional is true. First statement is false and the second statement is true. That's where the conditional is true. And we're done. This is the answer for number 18. It's the last column. Number 19. Again, we only have two simple statements, so I'm going to have a P column and a Q column. P is true, true, false, false. Q is true, false, true, false. The first thing I'm going to have to deal with is inside the parentheses, the and of P and Q. That'll be the next column in my truth table. P and Q. The only time that P and Q is true is if both these statements are true. Otherwise, it's always false. So true and true, true. True and false, false. False and true, false. False and false, false. Then I'll deal with oring this column with my P column. So the last column consists of my entire statement that I was being asked to evaluate. So I'm going to form the or between this column and this column. The only time an or is false is if both statements are false. That occurs here. False or false is false. Otherwise, it's always true. False or false is false. False or true is true. True or true is true. And we're done. This is the answer to number 19. I'm going to do 21 now. This is to be read R and Q or P and Q. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have three statements here. So this is R and Q or P and Q. Three statements. So we're going to have a P column, a Q column, and an R column. And there's going to be 8 possible combinations now instead of just 4. Where my P column is true, 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 false, 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 false. My Q column is true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false. My R column is true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. Order of operations say that I do what's inside the parentheses first. So I'm going to and R and Q. R and Q will be the next column. Remember, and is only true if both these statements are true. Otherwise, an and is always false. So this conjunction is always true if R is true and Q is true. So if R is true and Q is true, this is true. So true and true, true. False and true, false. True and false, false. False and false, false. True and true, true. False and true, false. True and false, false. False and false, false. Then I'm going to form a column which is going to be P and Q. This is only true if both P and Q are true. Otherwise, it's always false. So true and true, true. True and true, true. True and false, false. True and false, false. False and true, false. False and true, false. False and false, false. False and false, false. Finally, I'll deal with the or, which is the entire statement now. So now I'm going to have to form the or between this column and this column, the or. Remember, an or is only false if both statements are false. Otherwise, it's always true. True or true, true. False or true, true. False or false, false. False or false, false. True or false, true. False or false, false. False or false, false. False or false, false. And we're done. That's your answer. These are the truth values of the statement we're being asked to evaluate. That's number 21. All right, I'm going to do one more. 25. We have three simple statements, P, Q, and R, so we must have three columns, P, Q, and R, and we must have 8 possible combinations. P column is true, 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 false, 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 false. Q is true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false. R column is true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. Inside the parentheses, I'm going to do the negation of P first. So I'm going to have a negation of P column next. The negation of P, the negation of true, false. Negation of true, false. Negation of true, false. Negation of true, false. Negation of false, true. Negation of false, true. Negation of false, true. And a negation of false, true. Then I'm going to deal with the or inside the parentheses. So my next column is going to be not P or Q, which means I have to take this column and or it with my Q column. The only time an or is false is if both this is false and this is false. So false or true, true. False or true, true. False or false, false. False or false, false. True or true, true. True or true, true. True or false, false. Excuse me, true. True or false is true. True or false, true. Again, the only time an or is false is if both statements are false. False or false, false. False or false, false. The last column is going to be the anding with R. It's going to be my entire statement. So now I'm concerned with this column right here and my R column. And the only time an and is true is if both statements are true. Otherwise, an and is always false. So we have true and true, true. True and false, false. False and true, false. False and false, false. True and true, true. True and false, false. True and true, true. True and false, false. And we're done. This last column are the truth values of the statement we're being asked to evaluate. So, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully by having worked through several of these, which are very typical problems that you could see on ALEKS, this will help you to better understand how to construct truth tables. Most of them are only going to have two component statements, P and Q. I might put a couple on there that have three statements, P, Q, and R. Okay. All right. I hope this helped out.